So, welcome everybody to another session of our beloved GPS, our beloved annual summit. I'm really happy to be here with all of you and being able to introduce our next guest in a second. In the meantime, I'd like to invite you to chat with us a little bit and let us know from which part of the world are you connecting from. Thank you, everybody. So from UK, Nigeria, Munich, wonderful Estonia, Paris.
Oh,
And I'm going to briefly introduce our next speaker, Dr. Sari Van Poelier. Dr. Sari is an international executive and team coach and an expert on agile business innovation with 40 years of experience. Sari is the director of Intact Academy, giving EMCC senior coach accredited TA training to coaches and consultants in 10 different countries. She's an accredited EMCC Global Master Coach, team coach, and supervisor, and she has published 34 articles and 5 books on leadership, coaching, and organizational change. So, without any further ado, over to you, Sari. Thank you.
uh, thank you, Maiten. No pressure. There we go. Good, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Welcome to this accelerating team transformation webinar. The idea is that I will give you some ideas and some experiences that I've had over the past years in team transformation. I'll present a framework for you to think about, how can we do team transformation and accelerate it? And each time I will discuss the 4 elements, probably I'll send you off into a breakout room to also discuss how could I apply that for my own practice. Is that okay with you? This is an interactive moment. Nodding means yes. Very good. Thank you, Andrew. You're awake this morning. Thank you very much for that. So yes, Maiten, I have been practicing team coaching and coaching for a very long time. I actually started as a large-scale organizational consultant, and then I realized, oh my God, I'm doing all these big system changes, but I need something to touch people's hearts because people will only change if they have an ambition, but they also need the pain. And if there's not a push and a pull factor, we will never transform business. Then I began to get really interested in individual coaching. I found TA, transactional analysis, for those of you. How many of you have done TA or something in the region of TA? Hey, Jennifer, good to see you. So I specialized in TA. At the time, there was only a psychotherapy training. So I'm also a psychotherapist and a couple therapist. And I translated, I'm sure many of you have had that experience. I had to translate everything into organizational terms as well. And I had a really big practice as an executive coach, a pretty global practice. I grew up an expat kid, so hence the many countries, Maiten. Um, And in that executive coaching practice, I don't know, how many of you are executive coaches? Can you just raise your hands? See, it's a workshop. You work, I shop. There you go. Very good. So many of you also have an executive coach practice. Well, I figured out I had all these big leaders who were responsible for organizations, and, the first session, they'd come in and say, please help me change my organization. How do I do this? I tell people what to do, but they don't do what I say. I don't know. This is mostly what they come with, or I'm changing my career. And then about the fourth session, they used to say, "Meh, there's something more personal going on, so that's okay." And then after I finished the executive coaching, they'd say, well, I've really transformed myself, but my context hasn't changed around me. The other leaders haven't changed. So now I'm leaving. And I used to think, Yale is going like this. So I used to think, oh gosh, I want to influence the whole system and the team. But the people who are transformed, if their context isn't transformed, they leave and then the context doesn't change. And I was really in it to change the team, the leadership team, so that the whole organization and all the people under it would have a better quality of work life. Do any of you recognize that? Andrew is going like this. Anna Oliveira is also going like that. Very good. Okay. So at that point, I was executive coaching for about 20 years, and I thought, oh, I have to switch to team coaching for many, many different reasons. One is I need to deal with the leadership team as a system and not just deal with them individually, because whenever I do it individually, nothing really changes systemically. So I really want to start doing that much, much more than I was doing at that moment. The other reason was that I realized that the longer I practiced, the more I was being asked to help innovate businesses. So I'd done product innovation, I'd done service innovation, but really what they needed was to accelerate their time to market. And to accelerate their time to market, they had to be able to innovate their leadership, their relationship to their customers, the way R&D, marketing and production work together, the way they managed cross-functional cooperation. And so I realized that really this executive coaching would never be enough. I really had to deal with the team as a system and to work with that to help them innovate. Actually, what I realized is we have such big problems today that if we don't teach people to go back to working as a team, and that we will not be able to innovate. So my realization was also, for innovation, you need a team, but a lot of people have forgotten how to work in a team. People in the West certainly are so focused on autonomy, and within psychology, we are also so very focused on creating autonomous individuals that we forget about homonomy, which is really the ability to accept interdependence. Does that make sense to you? Yeah. And it's really driven by the systems in organizations nowadays as well. We tend to recruit leaders who are very good in their own field, but who are really bad team players usually, because they have learned to have this big autonomous profile, but their ability to create interdependence is very low. Yeah, in my experience, but maybe I'm biased because that's the reason they call me in. That's also possible. Now, as I deepen my knowledge of this, and I'll share some slides in a second, I really realized that this whole question of what can we do together that we can't do alone, is really at the heart of transformation today. And I would say not only in business, but actually in the world. We have lost this sensitivity of asking the question, what can we do together that we can't do alone? And it is really at the core of innovation and of transformation, because innovation is driven by doing things together across disciplines. Most of the innovation that I find are at the edges. So always innovation is to be found at the edge of a system, inside out, between customers and organization, or at the edges between disciplines, between R&D and production, for instance, or at the edges between leadership and membership. And to cross those edges, you really need a sense of teaming. Hence, my focus on team innovation. Okay. Does that make sense so far? Yeah. Any questions? No. If you have questions, just raise your hand or put them in the chat because Jasna and Becky and others are monitoring you over there. I really like interaction, by the way, so please feel free to ask questions because I hate just talking to screens. So I'm assuming that all of us have practice here, and I'd love to hear you as well. I really have a sense of urgency in teaching people team transformation. That hence, Maiten said, oh, she has schools in 10 different countries. Yes, it's true. And I do it because I really have the sense that in the world, we need a sense of teaming to be able to innovate more quickly to solve the problems today. So it's not just a profession for me, it really is a calling at the moment. And I feel a great sense of urgency around it. What helps me is that I've been a director in multinationals for 23 years as well. So I kind of know the diminishing focus you get if you have to take a decision every 2 minutes, and the discipline you need to keep that sense of interdependency in mind as well. So that's also why, hence the urgency for me. Okay, so I will share with you a little bit about how I think about groups and teams, and then I will present this framework that I've developed over the past 20 years. It works for me, and I'm really curious about your feedback as well. So feel free to do that.
Before you start, we do have one question from Andrea
Okay.
de Jesus. Question is, how does this relate to startup teams?
Ah, great question. I'll go back then to stop sharing. Yeah. So I basically work in three different settings. I work in multinationals, but that's a different ballgame. I work in family business, and I'm a startup coach for the European Union. And the way it works for startups is a little bit different, Andrea, because they are by nature innovative in terms of products and services. But surprisingly enough, they're often very traditional in terms of innovating their business model. So I find that many startups have this really inspiring kind of founder, and then in startup phase, they're okay. But as soon as they start to scale up until 50 people, they really need someone to help them find um, a sense of teaming because they're usually very big egos. I don't know what your experience is, Andrea.
Yes, thank you very much. This is going along my experience. It is exactly the challenge of having a fast growing structure
Yeah,
and people who have not get acquainted with each other enough to be able to produce together. So
yeah,
to work together. So it's an interesting challenge. So this was a real honest question from my side. What would be the
yeah. So thank you for that,
lessons for
and
that?
glad that you've broken the ice. So k- when we discuss the kind of four pillars of accelerated team transformation, just keep hooked in, see if that works for startups as well. What I find mostly in startups is um, when I actually start team coaching and they realize that they have to start working together across disciplines, sometimes people just leave in the leadership team because they suddenly realize that it's not just about them, it's actually about doing something together in the world. So yeah, but we can exchange later if you want, Andrea.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll go back to my sharing mode. Of course, many of you probably know this. There's many definitions of team coaching or team acceleration. I call what I do team coaching, but let's check if that's team coaching for you as well. what I like about this definition by Peter Hawkins, my colleague, is really that they work in the whole team about collective performance and collective leadership in a wider system. So for me, really, when I do this kind of work, my focus is on creating performance. So we always choose a metric, and I'll talk more about that later, which will help them solve their problems that they have now. And it is clear from the start that your client in this kind of work is the entity. So many people who come from individual coaching and move into team coaching say, yeah, I do team coaching. And then when I realize, what do you actually do, is they're coaching individuals in the team. But for me, that's a completely different ballgame. So the work I do is much closer to what Peter does as well, which is I coach the team as an entity, which means for me that the whole is much more important than the parts. And practically, that also means that, hi, Yael, I've seen you just a sec. That also means that if in those first sessions of team coaching, we realize that some people are really in there only for themselves and not to create dependency, there is a very serious talk with them, because if you want to go from group to team, you need people who are willing to invest in each other. So, yeah, this is an important framework to use. Yael.
So yeah, I'm really pleased you brought that definition. And actually what I'm curious about, and I keep asking that question, is I define myself as a system coach.
Yep.
Not a terminology that is very easy to explain to anyone. And I find it
I do
different
too.
from team coaching. And I'm just curious about your views on that, because
Yeah.
it is about coaching the system. The system is the client, not the individuals within that.
Yeah.
And when I see definitions of team coaching, which of course are very valid, I'm just curious about your perspective about the difference between calling ourselves system coaches and team coaching coaches. I just really feel,
We'll talk later, Yael. Let's do this at the bar. It's fine. Yeah, but I'm very, because I came from an organizational consultant perspective, I always see what I do in terms of the larger system. So if you press here, this arm goes up, kind of thing. Whatever thread you pull, it's like Ariadne's threads, you pull one thread, you have to be sure to pull the one that brings all the other ones forward as well. But we can talk later, Yael. This is going a bit too far at the moment. What is important for me, again, here is that really it is not the same thing as coaching individual people within a group setting. And actually, a lot of my clients, they call me up and they say, please come coach the team. And I come into the room, and it's actually a group, not a team. So how many of you, do you recognize that? How many of you reckon? Yeah. So I don't know, people call me up because they think teams are much cooler than groups for some reason. And then they say, oh, we are going to do team coaching. The fact of the matter is that groups and teams are equally valuable. It's like you have to have the right hammer for the right nail. So mostly I come in, they want to move from group to team. But my first question is always, why? Because managing teams requires much more investment on the part of leadership than managing groups. And groups are great for operational tasks, which have standard operating procedures. So if you have a lot of repetitive work and volume to manage, a group is a much better vehicle than a team, within my world. It's hierarchical, you can scale it easily. It's a repetitive task. You have clear roles and definitions. People love races at that point. And so when I come in and I see, for instance, in production companies that they say, oh, we really want to become a team, go, my gosh, you just have to become a better group. If you become a better group, you'll win. We don't have to invest all this into interdependency because you actually don't have any interdependent tasks here. What are you going to gain if you work together, if you pretend that you're completely interdependent? I'm saying it very black and white because I really want to make a point here about groups are just as good as teams, but they serve a different function. I hope that's coming across. Kurt, is it coming across? Okay, good. I find that the more you go in an organization towards process innovation or real disruptive innovation, the more you need a team. So a group is not enough to do severe process improvement or real disruptive innovation, because there you do need everyone interdependently. There you do need to create a sense of cross-functional cooperation. So to come back to your question, Andrea, when you work in a a startup that's very innovative, you do need to work in a team, but unfortunately, they usually recruit people who are not very teaming. So that's the point. When we, of course, this is very black and white. So I always say to my clients, basically, if you want to break it down, there are three different types of organizations. You've got organizations that are very operationally focused, repetitive tasks, standard operating procedures. So operational business. You've got businesses that are really focused on process improvement. So they have standard procedures, but they want to do it more quickly. The metric is time. And then you've got basically industries that are really focused on disruptive innovation. And it's never one or the other, it's always percentages. So in some of the production companies I work in, they have, if I ask them, how do you spend your time? They have 85% of their time is spent on volume, standard operating procedures. 10% of their time is based on process improvement, 5% on innovation. In that case, it's often better for us to help them become a better group than to spend all that time becoming a team. This is my learning over the past 40 years, but you may disagree. So it's a good discussion to have. If I work, so for instance, I work in, I don't know, at the moment I'm working in a family-owned tractor production company. They've asked me to create a real team. A team feeling is something different than creating a team, and we'll talk about that in a second. So they want a team feeling, but actually a group is better for them. That's fine. Now I'm working with another company, huge international paint company, and they're losing market ground, and so they really have to focus on innovation. Now there, you see that they have to move from group to team because any innovation they do needs a cross-functional cooperation and interdependency. There, I am willing to invest in helping them become a team. But this is a really big ask in today's world because, as I said before, asking people to accept interdependence is like from birth in the Western society, we're taught to be independent, and then suddenly, oh my God, I have to team, I have to become interdependent. Interdependency means, um, Davo, if I win, you win. If I lose, you lose. We don't only have individual KPIs, we have group KPIs, which we call must-win battles. And if we don't succeed in the must-win battles, none of us gets a bonus. Now, that's a different sense. for most people. And it's a really, really, really big ask. Okay. So any questions about this? Is this clear so far? Yeah.
We do have a few comments and as well questions. So
Yep.
the last one was from Sagan Rossi. So if you can unmute, I'm curious, how does this look in a self-organizing team when there is not really leadership and members?
Yeah,
Oh, gosh.
exactly this. I was thinking of agile and
Hi, Sagan.
hi.
You're on a tropical island. I'm jealous.
I wish. So curious how this would work in this self-organizing
I
team.
know. I know. And nowadays we have dispersed leadership and self-organizing and self-management. People pretend it's very new. I introduced self-organizing teams in the 90s already. We're talking 1990s, for not to be clear. Look, you'll have to find someone else really to answer that question because I don't believe in it. Based on my experience, I don't think there are self-managing teams. What happened in all the teams that I introduced in the 1990s, of course, we all know Volvo started this. Volvo Scandinavian culture, it works. I've lived in Scandinavia, in Sweden, and it works because they have a very specific national culture. We tried to introduce the same thing in Holland. It didn't work because in Holland, people really reject leadership. We're known for our rebelliousness, hence they go, "You're a leader? We want to have a meeting about that." This is a bit how the Dutch hierarchy works. When we introduced it, we realized very quickly that when we abolished the leadership, well, it sounds really dramatic, but when we introduced self-managed teams, within 6 months, they'd appointed their own managers informally. And I do believe, so you'll have to ask other people who are specialized in this, but I've done it for about 10 years. I introduced self-managed teams and it didn't work. So we reverted to making the leaders official because we couldn't manage it otherwise. They started introducing informal team leadership. We couldn't, I was in the boards usually, so we couldn't manage them anymore. I'm all for empowerment. I'm all for developing the people in the team so that they can take decisions themselves. I do not believe that teams can run without a leader. So I don't know. Maybe there's other people who think very differently, but it's yeah. I did a lot of research when I was much younger into politically radical political organizations who were also self-managed, and they also didn't work. So I've kind of given up on it. But Sagan, I hope you have a different experience. Yeah, that's all I can tell
Thank
you.
you. Thank
I'm
you,
sorry.
Sari.
I don't have better news than that. There's a
It's
lot of research. If you want to read, there's a book called The Evolution of Cooperation. I don't know if you've ever read it. Very interesting. The premise is it possible to run a cooperative system without central leadership? I find it an amazing question to have. For me, it's never worked. There you go.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sari. It's
You're
great. It's great answer. It's based on your experience, and I think mainly we can relate. But of course, there are others with others' experiences as well. We have also another.
I remain hopeful. Yes. Yes,
Yeah,
but
this
but
is
I
all that
hope
we
to be
have.
proved
So
wrong at some point in my life. But there you go.
yeah, but you
Okay.
mentioned something very important. It's also about the culture and the way where are we coming from. So I have
Yeah, but
similar experiences. So I would relate with your answer, and I'm quite happy with it.
it's also, I think, almost biological. It's
Mm,
somatic in our cells, the
exactly.
way we none of us, we're all born in relationship, but the relationship is always biologically towards, we have systems of leadership in our families of origin. That's what we grow up in. I think it's really, really hard to go against so much socialization. But it's a different discussion, a very interesting
Yeah,
discussion, but a different discussion.
I
Shall
agree.
I
So
go
nicely
on?
said.
I want to go on to my
We still have
uh,
few questions. So would
one
you
more,
rather
and then I want to go on.
one
Yeah,
more?
one more.
So is it a puzzle or a problem? Casey refers to this in context of group or team. This seems to reinforce what you are suggesting, Sari. And it was from Davo Ruthven.
Davo, where are you?
Hi, sorry. Yeah, it was more of a comment.
Hiya.
It's just I really liked so it's not a question, so forgive me. It was this notion of the differentiation between group and team, and that distinction, and how
Yeah.
groups, if it's a puzzle, you almost certainly don't need a team. It's just not complex enough. But when you get into a
Yeah.
problem, that's when you need to cross over those boundaries of relationships, and get into those thorny relationships. And that's
Yeah.
where the interdependence of the team, and
Yeah.
that really helped me in terms of the distinction between the two.
Yeah. As soon as it becomes a cross boundary problem, as you say, any boundary, inside, outside, leadership, membership, discipline, then really you go in the direction of teaming. But otherwise, if it's monodiscipline with standard operating procedures, a group is enough. And I'm very grateful for that. But getting people to be a better kind of group, so respecting authority, using the structure, using the set decision-making parameters, that's really important then. Working together in a group is different than working together in a team. And it goes a bit too far, but you probably know you're going like this, so you probably know what I'm talking about. Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So are you ready to go to the 4 columns I'm excited to share with you? Yeah, so over time, you'll get this, so you don't have to photograph it or anything. I know some people are kinesthetic, so they like writing things down. So let me take you through this. So over time, I've developed this way of working within teams to help their transformation or their innovation and to accelerate their development. When I started, I was trained as a psychologist and, as I said, as a therapist as well. When you come in with that kind of background, you love diving into dynamics immediately within a team. And the thing is, most of our clients, when they call us up, they say, oh, I don't know, people are not cooperating, or Peter is fighting with Mary, do something, or something like that. But usually the presenting problem, we call it, is at the level of dynamics. And so the tendency and the seduction almost is to work at the level of relationship within teams very quickly. Do you recognize that? Yeah. Okay. And what I've found over time is when you do that, you actually make the problems worse. So over time, I have really found and experimented and researched that we have to start somewhere else to be able to create, accelerate the development of a team. Because if you start stirring in the relationships without it being clear what direction the team has to go into, or that they have a safe container structure, in other words, then anything you do in terms of relationship, kind of the energy dissipates, or the dynamics escalate. So it's like in a marriage, if any couples therapist would probably say, when you go into a therapy, the first thing you do is make sure the boundaries are clear. And for that period of time that you treat them, I'm doing like this, the boundaries have to be safe. because else all the energy is displayed. It's the same in teams as far as I'm concerned. So what I do nowadays, and we'll take each column at a time, and I'll send you into short breakouts about this, is I always start with the first step, which is what direction are you going to take? I call it the compass. And within that, what's really important in when I work with a team is to determine with them what is the purpose of this team. You know, why are you here? What function do you have in this system? And the answer is not making as much money as possible. That's a purpose of a team is always focused, as you know from Simon Sinek, is always focused on the why, and it's always linked to the end customer. So why are you here? Because the purpose is also much more lasting. The why is always much more lasting than the what and the how. So if people know their purpose, then probably they will be able to sustain even in crisis mode. For us at an individual level, when we talk about purpose, really, we talk about, you know, how do you fulfill? I always think, how do you turn your story into a contribution for others? That's at the individual level. At the team level, it's always about what can we do together that we can't do alone that will benefit our end customer. I once worked with a pizza company, and it was a family business. The grandson didn't want to take over, and the grandson didn't want to take over because it was a company like everything, all other companies. You know, they were not only providing pizza; they were just become a generic fast food company. And he said, "There's no heart in this company. I don't want to do this." And I was hired by the grandparents who said, "We really have a problem because we don't have any successors. We've been running this for 50 years. So can you help us?" And I walked around in their first restaurant and I saw a picture on the wall. The picture on the wall was of their own kitchen and a huge table with all these people. And I said, "What's this?" And they said, "Oh, that's when we started the company." So one of the first things I did was I interviewed the grandparents in the presence of their children and their grandchildren, including the grandson. And I said, "Why did you ever start this company?" And they said, "Well, in the Second World War, we fled from Italy and we arrived here. But we missed home so much. We were so homesick that we started to cook our own food. And then we realized that there were a lot of people around us who were also immigrants, who also missed their culture. And so we started inviting people in. And before we knew it, in our kitchen, we were cooking traditional Italian food for all these people. And we would talk about the old country and we'd all feel better. That's why we started the company. And as we became more successful, you know, there were more restaurants during Corona. We started just generic fast food and we lost our soul. And at that point, this is a very long story. It really, in time, it was much longer process, but you understand that at a certain moment, the grandson stood up and he said, "But that is the purpose I want to work for. If it's really about connecting people to their heritage, that's the kind of business I want to run." And I think that's why I start with purpose. You know, why are you doing this? What is the reason you're doing this? And what is it you want to cause in the end customer? Okay, does that make sense? Yeah. Most teams have no clue when you come in and say, "What's your purpose?" They say, to produce as much as possible in as little as possible time. You know, when you go, "But why do you they go, "What planet are you from?" You know, it's kind of like that. I try to make it as simple as possible for them. We have purpose canvases. You can probably find them online as well. But the idea is that they find a we say in Dutch, point on the horizon. Where are we going with this? Why are we doing this? The second step in that compass area is goals and priorities. Now, many of you know, probably if you work in teams, they have too many priorities. They have hundreds of them. You know, I ask, what are your priorities? They give me lists. And every person in the team has like 20 to 30 priorities. And I go, but what are the team priorities? Team priorities? We have individual KPIs. You know, this is killing for the team feeling, as you can imagine. So after this idea about purpose, what I help them with is set priorities. And what I tell them, and they kind of hate me for this, but I don't really mind very much, is I say you can have, probably, you have your own KPIs, which are just the operational goals you have. But as a team, you can have 3 or 4 priorities every 6 months. That's it. And they go, what? Yeah, really, you can have 3 or 4 what we call cross-functional must-win battles. Things you are responsible for as a whole team. And I work usually with leadership teams. So, you know, I speak to the leadership team for that. What is it that is absolutely necessary to do to be able to be a winning team in the coming 6 months? And what I usually do, what help them with, is to create what we call a transformation map. So I help them map what product services do you need to develop, what customer target group change do you want, and then if those are the things you want, what does that mean for your team development? Can you imagine that? Yeah. And they go, yeah, we already have a strategy. And then I do this exercise and then I say, okay, so this is what you want to achieve. Now write down every single task you do. Look at your agenda for the past 3 months, every single task on a different post-its, and stick it. What tasks are you actually doing that is helping you get to that point? And they do that, and then they hold whole stacks of little post-it notes in their hands of all these tasks that aren't contributing in any shape or form to their purpose or to their priorities. It's an interesting exercise to do. I highly recommend it. I do it myself every year as well for my own business. So I'm always left with this little stack of post-its and I go, why do I do this? Well, in teams, it's the same. Yeah. And I teach them to delete, delegate, but mostly delete. I sometimes am in teams where they have projects that have been running for, I don't know, 6, 7 years and have never gotten a result. And I'm going, is it helping you reach your purpose? If not, just delete it. Yeah, but we've invested millions. Yes, you're going to invest a lot more millions. It's not going to get you anywhere. Is that what you want? No, not what we want. Okay. What are you going to do? Yeah. The last thing in that bucket is really helping them set a metric for success. And most of you who work in teams know organizations have many, many, many metrics. So at the same time, and most of the metrics, if you increase one metric, it automatically decreases the next one. So it's really quite uh, difficult to work with so many metrics in a team. Do you recognize that? No? Yes? No? Sarah Young? That's a yes, I guess. So, for instance, they have financial metrics. We want to make a lot of profit. They have customer satisfaction metrics. They have employee satisfaction metrics. They have innovation rate. Basically, more or less, and there are many more, but more or less, that's it. But I always explain to them, listen, if you want to increase customer satisfaction and your rate of innovation, automatically your profit will go down. So do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah. If you want to increase employee status or innovation rate, for instance, you want to introduce many more. I worked for a beer company. They were introducing 27 new brands in a month. I was going, why? Because if you have that high an innovation rate, automatically your customer satisfaction goes down for the next period. Interestingly enough, we've done the research. So what I teach people in this first bucket, purpose, where are you going? How do you priorities? Of course you have operational, but diminish. And then how are you going to measure success? Choose one metric every 6 months, not all of them, because you're not going to make it. And they go, headquarters. I go, yep. And, if you say to headquarters, you're going to make more money because of this, what do you think they'll say? Oh, yeah, probably they'll say yes. Yeah, it's true. Because a lot, what I help in this bucket to figure out the direction, the main thing is to run it, these must-win battles like Scrum projects. If many of you are probably familiar with Scrum, and to help them focus on one thing at a time in terms of team development. And that usually seems to work. So yeah, I'll tell you if it didn't work, but it does work till now. And the metrics have to be linked to their major problem at that moment in time. For instance, I'm quiet because I'm thinking of one of my clients at the moment. So I'm working with this big paint company, and they've lost market share, and their main problem is that they're not cross-selling across countries. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons their market share is going down. Each country is managing themselves as if it's their own kingdom instead of part of a larger whole. So these leaders have lost the sense of really being a team. So we help them change the structure. I should say that. But our main metric in the coming 6 months is cohesion, cross-cultural, cross-selling. And if we manage to up that rate, we know that we've succeeded probably in forming that team. Does that make sense? Yeah. You always have to choose a metric that will solve the underlying problem. It's a long story to go with that. So before I put you in breakout rooms, are you still awake? Is this still interesting to you? Yep. Okay. Thanks, Christine. So what I suggest is that we go into a very short breakout room, about 5 minutes or so, that you can talk about how you work with priorities, specifically priorities when you work with teams. Is that okay with you? Yeah. And it's very, very short. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. So because it's about priorities, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Ready for the next kind of stack of the model? We did this. So with the team. So the first question is, are you a group or a team? Why do you want to become a team? Really? If they want to become a team, the trick is to create interdependence. And to give you a very quick example of this, I was asked to coach bank managers who'd been made redundant. So I had them in this big class where they had to reorient, that's the nice word for it, reorient on their careers. And I had all these egos in the room, and I thought, oh my God, this isn't going to work. Because the best people are going to find jobs very quickly, and then I'll be left with the people who won't find a job in any case. So how I have to turn this from a group to a team very quickly. And so I said to them, the contract here is that nobody can leave the group until everybody has found a job. This was the quickest turnaround from a group to a team. And what happened was, of course, the people who were better placed found a job and then realized they'd made a signed contract they couldn't leave. And they got so bored with being in the group, they started to find jobs for the other people. That's that's creating interdependence artificially, how to go from a group to a team. So the first question you ask is, are you a group or a team? Is it necessary for you to become a team? The second thing you do is, let's figure out where we're going together first, before we do anything else. I know there's a problem. What are you doing together that you can't do alone? What is your purpose? What are the priorities as a team, and how are you going to measure success? Okay. Once you've got that in place, the next step is to create a structure, a container that's healthy. So what's under this container, what I pay attention to is boundaries. I look at the boundaries between in and out, between leaders and members, between disciplines in a team, because often the problems are at the boundaries. The friction is at the boundaries. I look at hierarchy. So is it clear who is allowed to take decisions, and what role people have? And I look at processes, but more specifically, decision-making processes. These things together determine the formal division of power in a team. How the decision-making process goes is often a symptom, shows you if the structure is healthy or not. So I often come in teams where they take decisions, but they don't execute. They take decisions or always come back to them. They don't take decisions. And often it is a symptom, the fever, if you wish, for the underlying infection of having a lousy structure. In my world, I've seen you, Jennifer. I'm just going to continue a second and finish this and come back to you. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay, great. Boundaries are an interesting given in this. I sometimes come in teams where people don't even know who is in the team and who's not. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that. I say, so who am I going to coach? And they go, last time I had a startup, and I said, so who am I going to coach in this startup? And he said, well, the leadership team. He said, okay, who's in the leadership team? He said, well, production, my head of sales, and my secretary. And I went, what? Your secretary? And he said, yeah, you have to know, I was called in because everybody was fighting about who was boss in this team. So this is kind of the contextual background. I said, why is your secretary in the team, the management team talking? And he said, well, if I'm on vacation, she takes over my role. I said, what? She's taking over your role as CEO? He said, yeah. I went, oh no. Okay, this explains some of the dynamics in the team. So, for us as team coaches, if you will, or team facilitators, it's really important that after they know what direction they're taking, that the structure becomes clear. Do you have the structure that will support you realize your purpose? I always tell my clients there is no best structure in a team. You need a structure that supports your purpose, but every structure you choose will solve one problem but cause the next. So, I'm now again, I'm in a wave of people who've decided that matrix structure are their Bible, it's going to solve all problems in the world. And then I go, yes, it will solve one problem, which is you'll break up kingdoms of power in the hierarchical structure, and you will get closer to your clients. And it will cause the next problem, which is your overhead will double. So it's not, I've never seen it work otherwise in the last 40 years. And they go, what? It's going to cost? I said, yeah. I go, oh, we're going to do it anyway. I go, it's fine, but every structure will solve one problem but cause the next. The question you have to help them answer is, what structure is optimal for us to realize the purpose we have now? Does that make sense? Yeah. So, yeah, so my second point of intervention is really, okay, you want to become a team, we've got your purpose. Now we have to figure out what is the best possible structure for you to realize that. And I focus a lot on boundaries, who's in, who's out. Do people actually take their role? Sometimes in a team, I have accidental leaders. I don't know if you ever have those clients, those leaders who say, yeah, I'm a leader. It could have been anyone. My door is always open. And I go, okay, but it's not. You are the leader. So in this case, take your role. I have abdicating leadership often in teams, which creates a lot of dynamics. I have leaders who are over controlling, so they don't respect the leadership membership boundary, and it causes a lot of dynamics. Often the dynamics they come with as a presenting problem is caused by the fact that the structure is not respected. So whenever someone comes with people are not cooperating, or Peter and Paul and Mary are fighting all the time, I first go to structure. Is the structure clear? Does that make sense to you? Yeah. Chris is going like that, so I'll take that as a group yes. For what I help them with often is to figure out their hierarchy as well. So who gets to take what decisions? And often that's not clear. So it's very helpful to accelerate the team development to help them figure out what is actually the process of taking decisions and following them up in this team. Now, there's a whole lot I could say about that, but basically, that's a part. Also, in terms of power, I always say if you don't use it, you lose it, and that's true. There are many leaders that I work with, at least, who are, you know, I come into, for some reason, I'm at the moment I have a lot of clients who never do consequence management, so who never fire people or confront them with bad behavior. And if you don't do that regularly as a leader, you lose your power, whatever position you have. Okay, so let's check out if there's any questions about this column, because I'm very aware of time. So I think Jennifer, you had a question.
Yes, thank you so much. I think
Yeah.
you've answered it to some extent, but I think I was getting a little bit mixed up with the boundaries and the
Yeah.
structure or hierarchy. And I just wondered what tools you used for defining those boundaries that were different to how you would set up the structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I use boundaries in the sense of Eric Byrne. So that means that I check out mainly three types of boundaries. We call it the major external boundary. So do people know who's in and or who's out of the team? With virtual teams, that's much more difficult. So nowadays, that's much more difficult to manage. And so it's very important that people are very clear about who's in or who's out. Sometimes with abdicating leadership, this who's in, who's out question is also, it's clear because they go, oh, we don't want to exclude them because they might get angry. Seriously, people tell me that, and I'm going, but they're not in the leadership team, so why would you include them? You know, they're not in a decision-making forum, they're a supportive function. So, yeah. So this whole this in or out boundary, Jennifer, is really important for me to have. It's actually one of the first points of intervention when I talk to the leader and I ask them who's in the team coaching. This is a long discussion sometimes because they're not clear. And as soon as you start including people for all kinds of dynamic reasons, you know, fear of confrontation, fear of conflict, then you see that the team becomes a mess. So I use the major external boundary, and I use a concept which is the major internal boundary, which is, do you respect the difference between leadership and membership in this team? And I work a lot with constellations, Jennifer. So if you can imagine, sometimes I ask them to stand up and there's all sorts in the room at that point. And I say, okay, leaders stand here. Line managers, you stand here facing the leader. And then I see HR and finance and IT getting into that line management. And I go, okay, so, but this isn't your position in the constellation. Really, you have a leader and you have line managers, and the HR finance are advisory functions. So the way decisions get taken is CEO, line managers, and then you ask HR, is it possible to do this given our resources? You ask finance, is it possible to do this given our resources? But HR and finance folks often like to get really close to leadership and pretend they're leadership, but it messes up the dynamics in the team. I see some people nodding, so I guess you have the same, some similar experiences. Now, I've been an HR manager for a long time, so 23 years in multinationals, always responsible for change. And I understand that people think that, but my experience is that the more you take your position in the structure as an advisory function, actually, the more power you have. So I teach people these things, Jennifer, as well. Is this so? Boundaries are. I understand. Yeah, structure is the hierarchy. There's a hierarchy, kind of. That's the authority structure, and boundaries are, you know, who's in, who's out, who's in the leadership, who's in the membership. Does that make sense?
Lots of sense. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Okay, that's a long story, so I'm trying to give you examples as well as I'm speaking.
We don't have any other questions regarding this part, just the comments. Sorry, just so that you know.
I got you, Christine. I get that a lot as well. So it's a really important point to discuss. Yeah. So the third container I look at when I want to accelerate the development of the team is, okay, you've got a direction. Now our structure is clear, and the structure gives safety to be able to work with the relationships in the team. So I never do the dynamic, cooperative, relational work unless the structure is clear, because it gives you the container. If people don't know the hierarchy and the roles they're in, they have no way of knowing really what type of relationship they need to have with each other. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you start working relationally without people knowing the hierarchy and the roles, then how are they supposed to understand, define what cooperative relationship they need to have? That's why I do that work first, the structural work. Okay, so the third kind of bucket I then start working on to accelerate the development or innovation in a team is the cooperative part. the relational part, the dynamic part in a team. And you can see here that there are some of the concepts I use for that. The first one is dynamics. So we talk about red dynamics and green dynamics in a team. So the red dynamics are the things that will disrupt a team. So agitation, intrigue, pressure. And the green dynamics is cohesion. And there's a myth in usually with coaches and leaders, which is that they can have a team without dynamics. The paradise lost of a completely cooperative and stable team. And what I tell people always is you need dynamics in a team. You need people to agitate and to have intrigue and to play games and to have conflicts. Because without all of that, you would never get innovation. So really, Jacek is not believing me completely. You need push, you need forces that go against, because if not, you will not push the boundary, quite literally, is my experience. And anytime you have a completely harmonious team, which is very stable and very, yeah, they do the operational work really well, but I find the innovation rate goes down. So there is a myth about this, like the myth of happy families, really. Tolstoy used to say, happy families don't have many stories to tell, or something like that, but it's true. The trick is, and this is almost like a formula, the level of dynamic, so agitation, intrigue, pressure, has to be balanced with the level of cohesion in a team. So that's the trick, Jacek. So if you have a lot of pressure on the team, as a leader of that team, you need to increase the cohesion. Yeah. If you don't do that, the team explodes or implodes. So what I teach people in the team is, as soon as there's more intrigue or agitation, the intervention is to increase the cohesion. Well, check the structure first, but then increase the cohesion. And I don't mean barbecues together. What I mean by cohesion is the will of the members and the leaders that the team survives. It's like in a marriage, really. You know, two people walk up together. If you're very lucky, you walk side by side for a long time. People change, maybe the purpose changes, you can survive it. The structure is broken, you can survive it. But if the will of one of the two or both is broken, that this marriage survives, then you've had it. It's the same in a team. So what I work on in this bucket is really to balance the cohesion with the dynamics. I look at what I call social ranking. So in its most simplified form, I look at the fact, is informal leadership in alliance with formal leadership? I look at equidistance of the leader with his members. So what often creates dynamics in a team is that a leader has friends, confidants in a team who are much closer to them than other people. And it's the same with having favorite children as parents in a family. You create dynamics. And so what I teach leaders a lot is to remain equidistant. And they go, yeah, I need someone to talk to. And I teach them, you have to talk to people at your own level. You have a role with people below you, between brackets. These things together, personas are how you fulfill your role. So these things together determine the amount of influence in a team. The type of exercises I do is often around this equidistance. As I said, I use constellations a lot. So I ask people to stand in a room. How close or far are you with each other? If it's a really trusting team and that they're very daring, I put 2 lines on the floor. One is trust in the person, and the other is how much influence they have in the team, and they have to stand in the quadrants. Well, obviously, if you have low trust, high influence people, it's going to cause a lot of dynamics. If you have high trust, low influence people, you want to make sure they get more influence, etc., etc. So those are the types of exercises I tend to do. I prefer having. I think the trick to team coaching is having people experience their situation in different ways so they can draw their own conclusions rather than telling them. So that hence that I really tend to do a lot of exercises in teams. With the dynamics about increasing cohesion, one of the things I do, for instance, is I have a very dynamic way of having them talk about good experiences and bad experiences in the team and what the underlying values are that were broken in the bad experiences, for instance. And then looking together at, are those really the values we want in the team? It usually creates more cohesion. Having a sense of purpose in the team also creates cohesion. The odd thing is, of all the things in psychology, cooperation is actually one of the most researched facts. We have research going back to the 1946 around what creates cooperation in groups. And it's a science. We actually know the 6 rules of creating cooperation in a group. And it works every time. If you don't know them, look them up. We know what people need to do to cooperate. And I usually teach them contact, contracting, making good agreements, communication, how do you communicate, creative conflicts, and consequence management. So that's what I teach them to cooperate better. Okay.
We have one
So
question in this part. Sorry.
great. Are
Is
we
there-
still doing all right? Is it still interesting to you? We're still okay? Good, Fiona. Thank you very much for that. So we're going through the levels of intervention. Now, actually, the order of intervention I do to accelerate development of teams. Thank you, Dudun. Yep, we have one question.
So we have many, but I will read the last one. Is there any optimal number of members there are in a team? And do you work with the whole group or them for all stages of the team coaching, or do you mix with individual coaching?
Well, you probably have an answer, Fiona. What's your answer? What's the optimum number of people in a team?
Well, interestingly, I don't do team coaching yet. I'm learning from you on how I might do it. But I'm just thinking of teams I've
No
worked.
pressure. Thanks a lot, Fiona. You'll
I've
need
been
more
thinking-
than an hour.
Well, I've been thinking about teams I work with. So when I worked in law firms and looking at the teams, and quite often you end up with sort of, say, 6 in the room. But I can just imagine with the whole sort of trying to please everyone, they might be like, well, let's just chuck in this, let's chuck in that, let's chuck in HR, finance. And I wonder whether there's like an optimal in order to make movement forward, because surely if you have too many, you just get stuck.
Yes, I find the same. So I coach a lot. Yes, in the beginning you have a lot of cover your ass. CYA, it's a technical term, team formation. So people say, let's involve everyone, so they don't feel left out. And the trick is really to focus on the core decision-making team. I do leadership coaching, so I can only speak to that. So I know many of you coach teams at different levels. I find I help them look at ratios. I don't know, you probably have some ratios in your head as well. Sometimes I find teams that are much too large for what they're trying to manage. So now I have a startup team, they're 40 people and they have 6 leaders. I'm going, 6? That's a lot. In my book. I usually find leadership teams of 4 to, well, I don't know, maximum 8, 7, 8, something like that. 7 preferably. I made the mistake, Fiona. I now had a business that was going from regional. They were very good at making furnaces, all sorts. They went from a regional, really started in a small village in a Slavic country, and they now are global. And they wanted me to help them move from regional leadership to global leadership. And because they all lived in the same village, because that's where it started, and they were really scared of leaving people out. The CEO said to me, yeah, I know I have to reduce this team, but let's start with 20. And I've been working with them for 2 years, and I've regretted saying yes ever since. So I'm still trying to help him reduce the number of people in that team, because what I realized very quickly, it was really risk and conflict avoidant. It was a symptom of their risk and conflict avoidance, and it just permeated the whole organization. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Well, it's my answer. Do with it what you want. Yeah. So the last thing I do after all of this is work on imago, reputation, how values a bit more culture, really. And some people always start with that. I always end with it because I need the purpose, the structure, and solving the conflict first. And then we can talk about how are you going to create a winning culture here. A lot is about reputation. I help them as an exercise interview clients to see what reputation they have as a team. And that often informs them in how they need to change their culture. I can't make it shorter than that, Maiten. How's that?
That was amazing, Sari. So
But
thank you
very
so much.
frustrating for the people in the room. Sorry about
For
that.
all of us, we want more, But we have to follow the rules of the leaders. So we are
Thank you,
going
Maiten.
to wrap up here. And before closing this fabulous presentation, I'd like to ask you, so based on the questions that you got, based on the vibrancy of the room, even if it is virtual, what would be your takeaway from this session?
My takeaway from my own session.
Yes.
Oh
yes.
my gosh.
Yeah.
I think what I'm trying to bring across is that team coaching or team development is a profession in itself. So please get trained before you do it.
Amazing closing. So, Sari, thank you so much. And thank you all for being here. So, thank you all.